Failure. A Grail-inspired clarification for humanity. Dispelling misconceptions, unveiling spiritual truth, and leading mankind out of the prison of false failure. Part 1. The True Nature of Failure. A radiant clarification from the Grail Message. Chapter 1. What failure truly is, the misunderstood experience of Earth life. Failure, as humanity commonly understands it, is a distorted shadow, an illusion created by the narrow viewpoint of the earthly intellect. The Grail Message teaches that nothing in creation occurs without meaning, without lawfulness, without connection to the seeds a person once sowed. Therefore, what people call failure is not a catastrophic end, a humiliating mark, or a divine punishment. It is a result, a mirror, an answer given by the unfailing spiritual laws that govern the entire universe. Man sees failure as defeat because he relies on the intellect, which is limited to material perception. The intellect clings to appearances, comparing outcomes with self-made expectations, and in doing so, it distorts his judgment. The spirit, however, sees differently. From the standpoint of spiritual laws, particularly the law of reciprocal action and the law of the attraction of homogeneous species, what people call failure is simply the reflection of their inner condition, their choices, their vibrations, and their alignment or misalignment with the will of God. Failure appears painful only because man resists learning. He wants success on his own terms instead of on the terms set by the laws of creation. But the laws do not bend. They return to each human being exactly what he has set in motion. And thus, a so-called failure is nothing other than a call to alignment, a merciful correction, a redirection toward what would have truly served his spirit. Seen in the light of truth, failure is a teacher, not a tormentor. It is a gateway to clarity, not a verdict of unworthiness. It is the spiritual signal that a human being has stepped out of harmony, and the loving opportunity to return. Chapter 2. Failure as feedback, the lawful consequence of wrong seeds. Every thought, every decision, every desire, every deed is a seed. Through the laws of creation, especially the law of reciprocal action, each seed must bear fruit according to its nature. This is unchangeable, incorruptible, and eternally just. Therefore, when a person experiences an undesirable outcome, it is not failure, in the worldly sense, it is feedback from the cosmic laws. Humanity calls it failure only because it does not understand why the fruit is bitter. It does not remember the seed. The Grail Message explains that the laws operate with perfect precision. Wrong thinking produces wrong pathways. Wrong motives produce weak structures. Wrong timing produces collapse. Wrong inner attitudes attract wrong helpers or wrong circumstances. A person cannot sow seeds of fear and expect fruits of courage. He cannot sow seeds of impatience and expect results of harmony. He cannot sow seeds of vanity and expect the rewards of truth. When the fruit comes, whether pleasant or unpleasant, it is simply the lawful harvest of the seeds sown. Thus what mankind calls failure is a merciful revelation. The laws are showing the human being where his inner threads were misaligned. This feedback is not meant to shame. It is not meant to crush. It is meant to awaken. In this awakening, man learns to sow differently. He learns to live consciously. And through this conscious sowing, true success, inner and outer, becomes inevitable. Chapter 3. How humanity invented the fear of failure. The fear of failure is not natural. It does not come from the spirit. It is a product of the overgrown intellect, which mankind elevated above intuition. As soon as the intellect became master instead of servant, human beings began to live for appearances rather than truth. Thus arose comparison, competition, imitation, and the desperate search for approval. From these, the fear of failure was born. Humanity began to fear any outcome that did not match its self-made images of success. People feared embarrassment, judgment, loss of status, and the opinions of others. The intellect, concerned only with earthly advantage, magnified these fears until they overshadowed the spirit's natural trust in the working of the laws. But in reality, the only true failure is to deviate from the will of the Creator. All else is simply movement, experience, correction, and growth. The fear of failure is a prison built by man himself. It binds his hands. It clouds his perception. It weakens the radiations of his spirit. It attracts the very outcomes he fears. This fear is one of the greatest obstacles to spiritual progress today. The Grail Message exposes it as an illusion, a phantom created by living too much in the intellect and too little in the luminous clarity of intuitive perception. To overcome the fear of failure is to break one of the strongest chains holding humanity captive. Chapter 4: Failure versus Falling. Understanding the difference. Falling is part of movement. Failure is a human label. To fall means to miss a step, to lose balance temporarily, or to face an unexpected impact. But falling, in the spiritual sense, often precedes rising to a higher level. The Grail Message teaches that the spirit strengthens itself through experience, through recognizing its mistakes, through adjusting its course. Falling is an experience from which the spirit can draw strength and clarity. Failure, on the other hand, is a judgment, a finality invented by human thinking. The laws of creation do not acknowledge such finality except when a person refuses to learn. A fall becomes failure only when a human being clings to pride and refuses correction, surrenders to despair and abandons effort, rejects responsibility for his inner sowing, resists the lessons the laws are offering. Otherwise, a fall is simply a moment on the journey. In nature, a branch that bends does not fail, it adapts. A river that meets a rock does not fail, it finds another path. A seed that breaks open does not fail, it is fulfilling its purpose. Human beings alone condemn themselves for the necessary phases of growth. When the difference becomes clear, life becomes lighter, the soul becomes freer, and the path of development becomes joyful again, as it was meant to be. Chapter 5: The Purpose of Setbacks in Human Development. Setbacks exist because human beings are not yet perfect. They are still learning, growing, purifying, and discovering the laws that govern their existence. A setback is not a punishment. It is a signal, a pause, a redirection, or a refinement process provided by the laws for the upliftment of the spirit. In the Grail Message, we learn that life on earth is a workshop for the spirit, a place of testing, experiencing, and strengthening. Because of this, setbacks serve many purposes. 1. They expose inner weaknesses. Weaknesses hidden within may remain dormant unless outer circumstances pressure them to the surface. Only then can they be addressed. 2. They interrupt harmful paths. When a person is heading toward spiritual danger, a sudden halt, though painful to the intellect, is often a great rescue. 3. They purify motives. Many pursuits begin with mixed motives: vanity, ambition, imitation, fear, or greed. A setback reveals these impurities and invites cleansing. 4. They strengthen resilience and inner stamina. Only through resistance does the spirit gain power. Just as muscles grow by pressure, the soul grows through overcoming. 5. They redirect the individual to his true calling. Many so-called failures simply close doors that were never meant to be opened. 6. They cultivate humility. Humility opens the intuitive pathways. Pride blocks them. Setbacks humble the intellect so the spirit may lead. Every setback is a gift, though often wrapped in difficulty. In the light of truth, nothing is aimless. Everything serves the upliftment of the spirit, if the human being allows it. And thus, what the world calls failure becomes, in reality, a stepping stone, a purification, a clarification, and a guiding force toward one's true path. Part 2: The Spiritual Roots of Failure. What the Grail Message reveals about radiations, will, and consequences. Chapter 6: The Spiritual Will and its Effects on Earthly Outcomes. Every human being carries within a living core, the spirit, which radiates a quiet, pure will that seeks upward striving, clarity, and purposeful action. According to the Grail Message, this spiritual will is the true origin of movement in human life. It is the starter, the impulse giver, the inner motor. But in today's world, humanity rarely acts from this core. Instead, people rely heavily on intellect-made decisions, calculations, fears, and social expectations. This disconnect produces outcomes that feel like failure. Failure begins long before an action is taken. It begins at the point where a human being ignores or suppresses the inner spiritual prompting. When the spiritual will flows freely, actions align with the laws of creation, Steps feel natural and unhindered. Doors open at the right time. Guidance appears effortlessly. Strength rises from within. But when the spiritual will is blocked by anxiety, pride, imitation, laziness, or fear, then results appear chaotic or disappointing. Failure, therefore, is a signal of misalignment, not a punishment. The Grail Message explains that spiritual radiations precede material manifestation. The inner volition shapes the ethereal form, which then condenses into earthly events. So when the spiritual will is unclear, contradictory, or suppressed, the resulting earthly outcomes are equally confused. Thus, understanding failure begins with understanding this foundational truth. Your earthly life is the echo of your inner will. Clarity within produces clarity without. Confusion within produces confusion without. The spirit wants to move upward, while the intellect wants to protect comfort and avoid risk. This tension, when unresolved, produces the missteps, stagnation, and setbacks that people mistakenly label as failure. In reality, it is simply a mismatch between inner will and outer action. And life responds faithfully to that mismatch. Chapter 7. Failure is a disturbance in radiational harmony. Everything in creation emits radiations. The human spirit emits the purest form of radiational power, one that seeks harmony with the light. When a human being lives in truth, joy, gratitude, and purpose, his radiations are bright and attract helpful currents, opportunities, and supportive people. But failure often arises when something disturbs this radiational field. The Grail Message explains that every thought, every emotion, every decision alters a person's radiational environment. When fear, resentment, doubt, envy, or impatience arise, they act like clouds covering the sun. They weaken the natural strength of the spirit and disrupt the attraction of uplifting, constructive currents. In this weakened state, a person misjudges situations, forces what should unfold naturally, clings to the wrong environment, attracts people who mirror inner unsteadiness, chooses paths outside their true calling. From this misalignment, outcomes appear as failure. Thus, failure is not primarily external. It forms first in the invisible radiational field surrounding the human spirit. Imagine a musician trying to play an instrument that is out of tune. No matter how skilled he is, the sound will not be beautiful. Likewise, a person surrounded by disturbed radiations cannot produce harmonious results, no matter how gifted or hardworking they may be. Failure therefore becomes an invitation. Clear your radiations. Restore harmony. Allow the light to support your path again. Once harmony is restored, what previously collapsed becomes strengthened. What once delayed begins to flow. What once appeared impossible becomes achievable. Radiational order always precedes earthly success. Radiational disturbance always precedes earthly setback. Chapter 8. The role of wrong inner attitudes in producing failure. Wrong attitudes are among the greatest creators of failure because attitudes are seeds. They radiate continuously, shaping conditions around a person. Some common attitudes that lead to failure include pride, which blinds a person to warnings and correction. Fear, which closes doors that courage would open. Doubt, which weakens the power of volition. Laziness, which attracts stagnation and decay. Impatience, which forces outcomes prematurely. Envy, which blocks gratitude and gratitude's blessings. Overdependence, which weakens personal initiative. Self-pity, which attracts similar depressing currents. Overconfidence of the intellect, which rejects higher guidance. Every attitude radiates a spiritual tone, and this tone attracts either uplift or downfall. The Grail Message explains that wrong attitudes create disharmonies that accumulate over time. They form knots, or dark spots, in the ethereal environment. These disturb clarity, weaken intuition, and distort perception. As a result, a person repeatedly chooses the wrong partners, stays in the wrong job, accepts the wrong advice, invests in the wrong direction, misinterprets cues, fights against natural timing, seeks validation instead of truth. What appears as repeated failure is usually only the harvest of these inner distortions. Correct the attitude, and the outward pattern automatically changes. The real goal is not merely to avoid failure, but to build inner purity, humility, truthfulness, courage, and clarity, so that the soul's radiational strength naturally produces constructive outcomes. Changing outer actions without changing inner attitudes does nothing. Failure must be addressed at its spiritual root. Chapter 9. When the intellect dominates, the birthplace of earthly collapse. In the current era, the human intellect has taken a place it was never meant to occupy. It was designed to serve the spirit, not rule it. It is a tool, not a master. When it becomes the master, the spirit is suppressed, and failure becomes inevitable. The intellect, by nature, is cold, calculates without insight, works only with past information, fears the unknown, cannot sense the living streams of intuition, prioritizes safety over purpose, sees competition instead of cooperation, clings to imitation instead of originality. When human beings allow this limited tool to govern their entire existence, they disconnect from the clear, forward-leading currents of the spirit. Without intuitive guidance, they walk blindly into experiences that do not belong to them. This produces careers chosen for prestige, not calling. Relationships chosen for comfort, not truth. Businesses driven by ambition, not purpose. Decisions built on fear, not clarity. Persistence in paths that are inwardly dead. Exhaustion from pushing against natural laws. The intellect alone cannot create lasting success, because spiritual laws shape the outcome of all earthly actions. When the intellect pushes in a direction that the spiritual will has not affirmed, the result is failure, sometimes immediate, sometimes gradual. Thus, many failures are not enemies. They are corrections, divine redirections whispering, "Return to your true path." The collapse happens only because the path was never meant to stand. Chapter 10. Spiritual Laws and the Harvest Principle, Why We Reap What We Sow. The Grail Message makes it unmistakably clear. No failure is random. Nothing in life is accidental. Everything unfolds according to immutable laws. One of the greatest of these is the law of sowing and reaping, often called the harvest principle. Whatever a human being sets into motion, through thoughts, words, actions, and attitudes, forms threads in the ethereal world. These threads mature and return to the originator. This return is the harvest. Failure is therefore not a mystery. It is a harvest of seeds sown long before. These seeds may include wrong motives, false friendships, neglected duties, dishonest dealings, hasty choices, disobedience to intuition, self-exaltation, unwillingness to listen, disrespect for natural timing, inner uncleanness. When the harvest returns, humanity cries, "Why me?" Yet the laws simply fulfill what was set in motion. However, this principle is not harsh. It is merciful, because every harvest, pleasant or painful, teaches. Failure becomes a teacher, not a condemnation. It becomes a mirror, not a final judgment. Through it, the human spirit learns where it deviated from truth, where it was inattentive, where motives were impure, where discernment was lacking, where growth is required, where renewal must begin. When a person tills the inner soil, plants new seeds, purity, courage, gratitude, truthfulness, the laws respond immediately. A new harvest begins to form. Thus, failure is only a stage in the ongoing curriculum of human life. It is not the end. It is the turning point. Part 3. Human Misconceptions About Failure. Dispelling the Shadows Cast by Ignorance. Chapter 11. Society's False Standard of Success and the Tyranny of Comparison. In the modern world, human beings have built an artificial scale upon which they measure their worth. This scale, constructed out of competition, comparison, and the loud opinions of the masses, has nothing to do with the will of the Creator, nor with the laws that govern spiritual unfolding. Yet it dominates human life. People are named successful, or failures, based on standards that are themselves fundamentally untrue. According to the Grail Message, every human spirit is meant to unfold according to its own inner core, its unique radiational pattern. No two paths are identical, and no destiny can be measured with another's yardstick. However, society forces everyone into a single mold: achieve what others praise, or be deemed a failure. This tyranny of comparison suffocates the free movement of the spirit. In truth, the only real measure of success is obedience to the laws of creation. When your deeds align with your intuitive perception, when your inner voice directs your steps and you follow it faithfully, you stand in success, even if outward conditions do not yet reflect it. The tragedy is that many have abandoned their personal calling, not because they were wrong, but because society could not understand their rhythm. And in trying to conform, they buried the seeds of their true path. The Grail light reveals that failure begins the moment you abandon your inner truth to match the world's illusions, not when circumstances around you temporarily collapse. Chapter 12. Cultural Illusions: How the World Defines Failure Incorrectly. Every culture, no matter how advanced, carries misconceptions that distort the meaning of failure. Some cultures equate failure with poverty, others with lack of education, others with the inability to meet communal expectations. But these definitions reflect only the surface of human existence, the dust of earthly thinking, not the deeper spiritual reality. The Grail Message teaches that earthly conditions are only the outer garment of inner radiational processes. What appears as failure outwardly may be a necessary turning point, a divinely permitted pressure intended to push a person back toward the right path. What looks like success outwardly may simply be the temporary triumph of the intellect, brilliant, noisy, and yet completely detached from higher guidance. Cultural illusions arise because people see only what is close to them: material results, social approval, and visible achievements. But creation evaluates outcomes differently. What matters is the inner movement, the choice of the will, the purity of intent, and the harmony or disharmony created by one's actions. Thus, cultural definitions of failure are often inverted reflections, judging people by what is least important while ignoring what is most vital. Spiritual truth corrects this distortion. Failure is never about lacking what society praises. It is about failing to heed what your own spirit quietly demands. Chapter 13. Emotional Interpretations versus Spiritual Reality. Human beings rarely see failure as it truly is. Instead, they interpret it emotionally. When something does not go as planned, disappointment triggers emotional storms: shame, frustration, hopelessness, anger. These emotions cloud the intuitive perception and make the person draw wrong conclusions about the event. The Grail Message emphasizes that emotions belong to the intellect-bound realm, not to the spirit. They distort clarity because they react based on habit, expectation, and fear. Spiritual reality, however, is governed by laws, not feelings. A setback may be the lawful consequence of a wrong inner attitude, or a merciful intervention preventing greater harm, or even the beginning of an upward turn, yet emotionally, it is perceived as humiliation. This emotional fog creates misconceptions such as, "I am not good enough," "Life is unfair," "Nothing works for me," "I always fail." Such statements are not truths. They are temporary emotional reactions that lose their power the moment the spirit looks upward again. To see failure correctly, one must lift the gaze above emotions, above intellect, into the quiet clarity of the inner being. Only there does one see the real meaning of every experience. Chapter 14. The Myth of Final Failure. One of the most destructive misconceptions in human thinking is the belief in a final failure, the idea that one mistake can permanently ruin a person's life. This belief has no place in creation. It contradicts the law of movement, the law of renewal, and the law of sowing and reaping. The Grail Message teaches that every moment is new, and every sincere change of will instantly alters the radiational direction of one's path. The spiritual world responds immediately when a person awakens inwardly and chooses a higher course. Nothing is final except the moment the spirit refuses to move. People fear final failure because they do not understand the nature of spiritual time. Earthly time is linear, rigid, measurable. Spiritual time is alive and responsive. A single act of clarity can undo years of wandering. A single genuine turning can open doors that seemed sealed. Thus, final failure is a myth created by the intellect, which sees only straight lines, endings, and limits. The spirit sees possibilities, renewal, and continuous ascent. You are not ruined. You are not finished. You are not trapped. As long as your will can turn upward, the path continues. Chapter 15. How Pride and Ego Distort the Experience of Falling Short. Pride is one of the deepest roots of the misconception of failure. It creates false images of oneself, inflates abilities, and attaches identity to achievements. When circumstances expose the truth, when an attempt collapses or a plan does not succeed, pride feels attacked, wounded, or destroyed. The person then interprets the event as failure, not because of its true meaning, but because it bruises the ego. The Grail Message cautions that ego is a barrier to spiritual clarity. It blinds the person to the lawful processes at work. A fall is meant to show the wrong attitude, correct direction, or teach humility, but ego resists the lesson. Instead of seeing the correction, it sees humiliation. Instead of gratitude for enlightenment, it sees disgrace. Many forms of failure pain come not from the event itself but from the ego's violent resistance to truth. True understanding dissolves this distortion. When pride is surrendered, falling short becomes simply feedback, redirection, adjustment, growth. Failure loses its sting when a person becomes honest, open, and humble. Then the spirit can finally learn and rise. Part 4. The Inner Consequences of Wrong Views About Failure. How Misunderstanding Failure Damages the Soul. Chapter 16. Self-Doubt, Shame, and the Darkening of the Inner Path. There is hardly anything as spiritually damaging as the wrong inner reaction to a temporary fall. In the Grail Message, human experience is shown to unfold according to the laws of spiritual movement. When a human being misinterprets an experience, especially an experience of falling short, they interrupt their connection to the light. Self-doubt arises the moment the human being begins to question not the action, but their own worth. This is already a deviation from the healthy path. Self-doubt suggests, I am not enough. But the spiritual reality is, I am a developing being still sowing and reaping. Shame is even darker. Shame clouds the inner chamber where intuition is meant to speak clearly. It bends the gaze inward in a destructive, suffocating way, not as reflection, but as self-condemnation. Under shame, a person no longer sees the step they missed, they only see themselves as unworthy. This is spiritual suffocation. These wrong reactions produce a radiational darkening around the person. The intuitive sense becomes muffled. Clear guidance from the light cannot penetrate easily. And so the individual begins not only to misunderstand the experience of failure but to walk blindly, increasing the risk of further missteps. The Grail Message teaches, only clarity brings freedom. To correct this darkening, the human being must switch from self-condemnation to objective perception. What did I sow? What consequence did it bring? What can I now sow to bring a better fruit? Wherever self-doubt and shame dissolve, the inner path brightens immediately. Chapter 17. Anxiety and Fear, the Chains Forged by Misinterpreting Failure. When a person sees failure as catastrophe instead of feedback, fear is born. Fear grows from distorted interpretations. It then becomes a permanent companion, coloring every decision, poisoning fresh beginnings, and weakening radiational strength. The Grail Message explains that fear compresses the radiations of the spirit, making them heavy and sluggish. A fearful human being cannot project light, courage, clarity, or creativity. They only project unrest, and according to the law of attraction of homogeneous species, unrest draws similar experiences. Thus, anxiety becomes a trap. Fear of failure brings tension. Tension disrupts natural flow. Disrupted flow increases mistakes. Mistakes confirm fear. Fear deepens into paralysis. This is not fate. It is the exact, lawful unfolding of inner attitudes radiating outward. Anxiety and fear are chains only because the human being holds them tightly. Once the experience of failure is understood as merely a temporary consequence, these chains fall away. The spirit lifts, radiations brighten, the human being moves again with inner freedom. The correction is simple and profound. Fear ends where understanding begins. Chapter 18. The Paralysis of the Intellect. Overthinking is a barrier to progress. The intellect is a powerful tool, but when made ruler instead of servant, it becomes the greatest enemy of movement. The Grail Message exposes the danger of intellectual domination, a rigid mental force that suppresses the intuition. Fear of failure fuels the intellect until thinking becomes overthinking, and planning becomes paralysis. The intellect keeps replaying past errors, imagining future disasters, and drowning the voice of the intuitive core that gently says, proceed. Learn. Grow. Overthinking is not intelligence. It is blocked radiational flow. The intuitive perception flows in pictures, impressions, and quiet certainties. But the intellect, in fear, shouts louder until the delicate intuitive signals can no longer penetrate. The human being feels stuck, not because life has stopped, but because inner mobility has been lost. This paralysis causes hesitation, indecision, missed opportunities, stagnation, self-sabotage. The path out is not more thinking. It is returning to intuitive listening. Whenever the intellect is put back in its rightful place, guided by the spirit, movement resumes. The fall was never the problem. The interpretation of the fall was. Chapter 19, The Burden of Regret and Its Radiational Effects. Regret is the attempt to walk forward while looking backward. It is spiritually impossible. Regret is heavy because it binds a person to a past moment that has already borne its fruit. Under the Grail laws, once a consequence is harvested, the experience is completed. But humans try to revive the past through emotional replay, remorse, or longing for a different outcome. This creates spiritual friction. Regret pulls radiations downward, making them thick and sluggish. It also opens the person to dark thought forms, structures fed by heaviness, that gather around them. These forms attract similar vibrations, amplifying the feeling of being stuck. The tragedy is, regret attempts to correct the past emotionally instead of sowing new seeds spiritually. A liberated view sees failure, error, or miscalculation as a completed classroom lesson. Its fruit has been harvested. Its gift has been delivered. The only task now is to apply what has been learned. Regret dissolves when the person finally says, I accept the harvest. Now I sow anew according to light. Then radiations brighten again, and forward movement becomes effortless. Chapter 20, How Misconceptions About Failure Lead to Missteps in Destiny. Destiny unfolds according to the spiritual choices a human being makes. But misconceptions about failure create wrong inner movements that can divert a person from their upward path. When a human being sees failure as shame, catastrophe, or a sign of unworthiness, they often abandon their calling, shrink their aspirations, choose paths of lesser resistance, fear new opportunities, cling to comfort zones, suppress their innate abilities. These are wrong intersections in destiny, places where the person turns away from the path intended for their growth. The Grail Message explains that the human spirit unfolds through experience, courage, and decision-making. But wrong interpretations of failure choke all three. The person becomes timid instead of bold, calculating instead of receptive, and stagnant instead of striving. Destiny is not lost through a fall. It is lost through misunderstanding the fall. The moment the individual recognizes failure as merely the harvest of past sowing, a neutral feedback mechanism within creation, destiny realigns. The spirit stands upright again. Courage awakens. The human being steps once more into the stream of upward development with renewed clarity. Part 5. Failure in Daily Life. Understanding its influence in choices, relationships, and work. Chapter 21. Failure in Relationships. Lessons ignored, lessons forgotten. Human beings often blame the other person when a relationship fails, whether between friends, couples, parents and children, colleagues, or even communities. Yet the Grail Message teaches that nothing happens without inner causes, and that every experience returns to the human spirit as a mirror of what it carries within. Most relationship failures stem not from external events but from unaddressed inner faults: impatience, pride, vanity, distrust, possessiveness, fear, and distorted expectations. These radiations invite corresponding experiences that eventually strain or break human connections. A relationship only collapses where one or both parties refuse to learn the lesson intended for their inner growth. A controlling person attracts tension. A distrustful heart attracts dishonesty or withdrawal. A proud spirit creates distance even when surrounded by love. One who is emotionally inconsistent harvests instability. Every failed relationship points to a lesson forgotten, a weakness left unpurified. The Grail Message explains that the laws of reciprocal action return to each person the fruits of their inner sowing. When a bond breaks, it is often a merciful opportunity to stop injuring others with our faults, or to finally awaken to our own radiational disharmony. Thus, relationship failure is not punishment, it is instruction. And only those who refuse to learn will repeat the same painful cycle with new partners, new friends, or new environments. Chapter 22, Professional and Financial Failure, the Harvest of Wrong Inner Seeds. Most people interpret professional setback or financial collapse as either bad luck or external unfairness. But spiritual law never functions randomly. According to the Grail Message, success and failure in earthly work are governed by inner radiations, clarity of will, purity of motive, and the degree of spiritual openness. Professional failure may arise when work is pursued purely for personal gain, lacking inner conviction. Fear, anxiety, and impatience disturb radiational harmony. Pride or laziness weakens the quality of one's actions. Wrong decisions are made through cold intellectual calculation instead of intuitive perception. A person goes into a field that does not correspond to his or her spiritual abilities. Financial collapse often signals years of inward misalignment. Greed, reckless ambition, envy, comparison, impatience, or a refusal to understand the inner laws governing material life. Money responds to order, clarity, self-discipline, and the natural reciprocity of giving and receiving. When these are missing, the collapse that follows is not misfortune, it is the harvest of wrong seeds. Yet, professional and financial failure can become the turning point that finally forces a human being to move in the right direction, serve rightly, and develop the virtues needed for lasting success. Failure here is often a blessing disguised, clearing away illusions so the spirit may stand upright again. Chapter 23, Repeated Mistakes, When Patterns Become Teachers. In the Grail Message, Abdrushan explains that the human spirit encounters repeated experiences not by accident but because it has not yet learned what the experience is meant to teach. Life repeats lessons with increased intensity until understanding is awakened. Thus, when a person keeps repeating the same mistakes, attracting the same kind of people, choosing the same harmful opportunities, falling into the same financial traps, making the same emotional decisions, sabotaging progress through fear or pride, it is not life that is unkind, it is the spirit that is asleep. Repeated failure is the most patient teacher, returning again and again until the inner attitude is corrected. Patterns appear not to shame the individual but to illuminate the exact place where transformation must occur. Once the inner attitude changes, through humility, clarity, and spiritual awakening, the external pattern dissolves naturally. Nothing external changes until the inner cause is addressed. Thus, the repeated mistake is not a curse, it is the precise pointer to where the soul must grow. Chapter 24, The Fear of Rejection and the Fear of Loss. Human beings often make poor decisions, not because they want to, but because fear drives them. Fear of losing someone. Fear of losing status. Fear of missing an opportunity. Fear of criticism or judgment. Fear of being alone. Fear of appearing weak or unworthy. This fear becomes a false master that pushes people into wrong partnerships, destructive compromises, unhealthy habits, and rushed choices. The Grail Message teaches that fear narrows perception, cuts off the intuitive voice, and lowers the radiations. The result is fogged clarity, and where clarity is missing, no decision can lead to a true outcome. Rejection is feared because humans cling to the illusion that their worth is determined by others' opinions. Loss is feared because people attach their identity to possessions, relationships, or societal structures. But the light reveals the truth. Nothing genuine can ever be lost. No human being capable of enriching your destiny can be taken from you. No opportunity meant for you can pass you by. No rejection can diminish your true value. What is yours by law will always reach you, without force, without fear, without compromise. Thus, the fear of rejection and loss is rooted in ignorance of spiritual law. Once the truth dawns, the fear dissolves like shadows before sunlight. Chapter 25. The Hidden Gift Within Every Collapse. In the Grail Message, collapse is never described as failure. It is described as the breaking of an old, wrong structure, so that something new, pure, and true may arise. Every collapse reveals what was built on pride instead of humility. What was pursued for vanity instead of service. What was held together by fear instead of truth. What was chosen through intellect instead of intuition. What was driven by haste instead of lawful timing. Collapse is often the light's intervention, pulling down what you would not have had the courage to dismantle yourself. Just as a diseased tree must be pruned so new life can sprout, collapse clears away illusions, false ambitions, distorted motives, and harmful associations. The hidden gift is release. Many people only awaken after everything they clung to has fallen away. Only then do they stand face to face with their true selves, and with the path they were meant to take. Thus, collapse is not an end, it is a turning point. Not destruction, but renewal. Not punishment, but purification. Not loss, but liberation. And those who understand this will rise from failure stronger, clearer, more radiant, and inwardly anchored in the will of the light. Part 6. Liberation from Failure Through Spiritual Clarity. How to rise through truth and radiational renewal. Failure is never the end for the human spirit. It is only an indication of where one stands, what one has sown, and what must be corrected. Liberation does not come through force, self-deception, or hollow affirmations, but through truth, through the purification of one's inner radiations, and through a renewed alignment with the laws of creation. This part unveils the clear path upward. Chapter 26. The Power of Honest Self-Confrontation. The beginning of liberation from failure is truthful self-confrontation. This is not self-attack, nor is it the emotional lamentation that humans often call reflection. True self-confrontation is a radiant, honest facing of what is, of the attitudes, thoughts, volitions, and inner seeds that have borne the fruits one now calls failure. The Grail Message teaches that nothing happens arbitrarily. A person's experiences are the exact harvest of their inner life. Therefore, to rise above failure, one must first recognize the roots of their downfall without excuses, without blame shifting, and without self-pity. Self-confrontation reveals where the will was weak or misdirected. Where pride, vanity, or intellectual arrogance overshadowed intuition. Where fear clouded perception. Where laziness or comfort-loving prevented necessary movement. Where motives were impure. This recognition is not meant to condemn, but to clarify. The moment a human being sees their mistake in its true form, spiritual chains fall. What was binding becomes powerless. Light enters. Self-confrontation is like opening a tightly shut room to fresh air, the stale odor dissolves instantly. That is how swiftly liberation begins once truth is allowed in. The person who is willing to confront themselves truthfully already takes the first decisive step out of the cycle of failure. Chapter 27. How right recognition ends the cycle of failure. Recognition is the hammer that breaks repeating patterns. Many people think failure continues because life is unfair, or because destiny is against them, but this is ignorance. Patterns continue only where recognition is lacking. Right recognition means seeing why something happened in exact correspondence with the laws of creation. For instance, if a relationship collapses, the real cause may lie in interdependency, pride, or unspoken expectations. If a business effort fails, perhaps the foundation lacked truth, persistence, clarity, or rightful motivation. If one keeps falling into the same mistake, maybe the spirit refuses the lesson being repeatedly offered. The Grail Message explains that the spiritual laws do not stop working until the human spirit has learned what it needs to learn. Without right recognition, life keeps presenting the same scenario in different forms until the truth is grasped. Right recognition dissolves ignorance, confusion, self-deception, false interpretations, emotional fog, blaming others, victim mentality. Once a human being sees a mistake as the natural result of a wrong inner attitude, the cycle stops immediately. This is because the spiritual seed has changed, therefore, the harvest must also change. Recognition transforms failure into upward movement. It turns what was previously painful into a stepping stone, a stabilizing insight, a foundation for new growth. The one who recognizes rightfully cannot remain bound. They rise. Chapter 28. Courageous Action. Moving in the flow of spiritual laws. Liberation requires movement. After recognition must come action. Clear, courageous, decisive action taken in accordance with the laws of creation. Failure persists where fear still governs. Even if a person knows the right thing to do, hesitation keeps them trapped. The intellect produces endless objections and imagined dangers, while the intuitive spirit quietly urges forward. Courageous action means acting without waiting to feel ready, trusting one's inner conviction, refusing to be halted by past mistakes, taking steps that align with truth, even if they are uncomfortable, choosing growth over safety, allowing the spirit to lead, instead of the calculating intellect. Courage is radiational. It lifts, widens, and strengthens one's aura. It magnetizes opportunities. It draws helpful currents from the light. When action flows from inner clarity, mistakes reduce drastically. Even if missteps occur, they are minor and quickly corrected, because the human being is aligned with the upward flow. This chapter emphasizes that courage is not an emotion. It is a spiritual decision, an act of will. And once this decision is made, the laws respond. The timid remain stuck in cycles. The brave rise and keep rising. Chapter 29. Rebuilding Inner Strength and Confidence. Many people remain trapped in failure because their inner strength has been weakened over time. Every disappointment, every setback, and every unresolved regret reduces radiational vitality. The human being begins to doubt themselves, shrink inwardly, and lose the natural confidence that springs from alignment with truth. Confidence is not arrogance. True confidence is certainty born of spiritual clarity. It arises when a person stands rightly within themselves. To rebuild inner strength. Remove wrong beliefs about failure, success, and self-worth. Cleanse the inner atmosphere through truthful thinking and noble volitions. Strengthen the intuitive voice through stillness. Discipline the intellect so that it becomes a tool, not a tyrant. Practice small acts of courage daily. Forgive oneself rightly, not sentimentally. Affirm truth by acting upon it, not by reciting words. Stand upright in every choice, no matter how small. Inner strength grows with every right decision. Confidence returns the moment a person begins to live in harmony with the laws of creation. They feel grounded, clear, purposeful, no longer tossed about by emotions or opinions. A confident spirit radiates stability. Life responds accordingly. Chapter 30. Radiational Realignment. Returning to Light-Guided Living. At its core, liberation from failure is a radiational process. Failure exists because the human spirit has stepped out of harmony with the light. Alignment restores order, strength, purpose, and clarity. Radiational realignment happens when one's thoughts are truthful, one's will is pure and firm, one's emotions are calm and disciplined, one's actions are upright, one's motives are noble, one's lifestyle supports clarity instead of confusion. The Grail Message teaches that every human being is surrounded by a radiational field. When this field is darkened by fear, pride, doubt, laziness, or wrong volition, failure appears as the natural consequence. When the field is bright, noble, joyful, courageous, success becomes natural because the human being is moving with, not against, the currents of creation. Light-guided living means listening more to intuition than to the calculating intellect. Following inner conviction rather than social pressure. Acting truthfully in all things. Rejecting dishonesty within oneself. Keeping one's inner world bright and orderly. Seeking purity of motives in all endeavors. Once radiational realignment occurs, failure loses its power. Obstacles transform into lessons. Darkness cannot attach itself. The human being becomes inwardly free. And where freedom is, success, in its truest spiritual sense, becomes inevitable. Part 7. Success in the Light of Truth. The true meaning of success according to the Grail Message. Chapter 31. What real success is, an inner state, not an earthly score. Humanity has imprisoned the meaning of success within numbers, applause, bank accounts, rankings, and achievements that vanish the moment earthly life ends. Yet the Grail message points to something higher, something untouched by earthly fluctuations. Success is an inner radiational condition, not an external result. It is the harmonious unfolding of one's spirit in alignment with the laws of creation. True success begins long before a result becomes visible. It begins the moment a human being awakens inwardly to truth, responds intuitively to what is right, and sets their will in motion accordingly. When the inner orientation is pure, every outward step gradually aligns with light, even if the road twists through challenges, pauses, or redirections that the world interprets as setbacks. Earthly metrics often reward cunning, manipulation, desperation, noise, and self-exaltation. But spiritual success can never grow from such seeds. It flourishes only where the soil of the soul is fertile, where sincerity, purity, courage, humility, diligence, and genuine goodwill form the inner ground. A life may look small by worldly standards yet radiate far more success than a publicly celebrated one. Earthly observers see only temporary outcomes. The laws see the inner movement, the seeds sown, the truthfulness of the will, and the attachment to light. Thus, real success is not what one achieves, but what one becomes. Not what one accumulates, but what one radiates. Not what one gains, but what one serves. Everything else the world calls success is merely decoration upon a temporary stage. When the curtain falls, only the radiational maturity of the spirit remains. Chapter 32. Success is the fruit of pure will and upright action. In the Grail message, the will is the core of man's spiritual existence. It is the seed that determines every harvest. Therefore, success is never accidental, nor is it a matter of luck, connections, or earthly privilege. It is the lawful result of pure will plus upright action, working together in harmony. A pure will is one that springs from the spirit without distortion by fear, vanity, greed, or ambition. Such a will is calm, firm, luminous, and steadfast. It is the will that desires what is objectively right, not what gratifies the ego. When a person stands upright inwardly, the laws of creation support their striving because their movement corresponds to the natural currents of light. Upright action is the visible expression of this will. Honest effort, sincere diligence, respect for others' paths, observance of natural order, responsibility for one's decisions, and the refusal to manipulate, deceive, or step on others. Where pure will and upright action meet, a powerful radiational stream is set in motion. This stream draws the right opportunities, helpers, insights, and circumstances. Not instantly, not magically, but lawfully. When the inner condition is right, the outer must align. Failure often results when the will is impure, the action is dishonest, motives are selfish, or laziness replaces effort. But when the will is clear, and the action is clean, success becomes a natural outflow. Such a person could appear to be struggling outwardly, yet inwardly they are ascending steadily. Success born of pure will is unshakable. Success born of cunning collapses the moment the winds change. Thus, the Grail message teaches, success is not something you chase, it is something you become capable of receiving through your inner state. Chapter 33. Spiritual achievement versus earthly achievement. Earthly achievement is measured by visible results, titles, wealth, awards, influence, skill mastery, or recognition. Spiritual achievement, however, is measured by inner transformation, the growth of virtues, the strengthening of the intuitive perception, and the purification of the soul through experiences. The two are not always aligned. A person may achieve much on earth but remain inwardly impoverished. Another may remain unnoticed in life yet build a radiant spiritual maturity that extends far beyond earthly existence. Earthly achievement is temporary. It expires with the body. Spiritual achievement is eternal. It accompanies the soul into the beyond. The Grail message warns that when earthly success becomes the goal, the human spirit begins to suffocate. The intellect then dominates, turning everything into competition, anxiety, comparison, and self-glorification. But when spiritual achievement becomes the aim, earthly achievements fall naturally into place, calmly, without obsession, without fear. Spiritual achievement manifests as clarity of recognition, ability to perceive intuitively, courage to do what is right, humility before the laws, unwavering inner peace, sincere love for one's fellow human beings. These qualities form an inner treasure no earthly loss can diminish and no earthly success can surpass. They endure beyond death. They shape the soul's path in the hereafter. They determine one's proximity to the light. Ultimately, earthly achievements matter only insofar as they serve spiritual growth. And spiritual achievements matter eternally. They form the true measure of the human journey. Chapter 34. Living without fear of falling. Most people pursue success not because they know what success is, but because they fear failure. This fear creates pressure, distorts perception, poisons motives, and drives people into unhealthy ambition. But the Grail Message shows that fear of falling arises only where one's footing is not in the light. Where truth guides a human being, fear has no place. The person moves with calm assurance, because their path is not built on ego, illusion, or external validation but on inner conviction and spiritual clarity. Living without fear of falling does not mean recklessness. It means trust. Trust in the laws, trust in the correctness of sincere effort, trust in the purity of one's motives. It means knowing that every honest effort bears fruit. Every setback brings a lesson. Every redirection serves unfolding. And every fall carries a seed of upward movement. Fear of falling comes from depending on men. Freedom from fear comes from depending on the laws. When a person aligns themselves with truth and remains sincere in their striving, the path ahead becomes illumined. Not all at once, only step by step. But each step is firm. Each step is safe. Each step strengthens the inner core. Such a person no longer asks, "What if I fail?" They ask, "Am I standing in the light?" If the answer is yes, then even a fall becomes a step upward, because the inner attitude transforms every experience into growth. Chapter 35. Destiny Fulfilled. The Highest Victory Over Failure. The greatest success a human being can attain is the fulfillment of their destiny, the unfolding of the spirit to its intended height, the completion of the tasks carried within, and the harmonization of one's radiations with the will of the Creator. Destiny is not fate. It is the natural path of blossoming for each spirit. Failure becomes permanent only when a person refuses to walk their path or stubbornly chooses a wrong direction. But even then, life will keep sending experiences, lessons, obstacles, and inner stirrings to correct the course. When a person responds to these calls, even late, even after many errors, the laws immediately begin weaving a new, upward-leading path based on the seeds newly sown. In this way, the victory over failure is not achieved by erasing past mistakes but by using them as material for transformation. Destiny is fulfilled when the inner calling is recognized and obeyed. The spiritual will becomes clear. One acts in service to truth. And the soul radiates purity and strength. Such a person lives with radiant simplicity. They do not strive to impress the world. They strive to remain true to the light. With this alignment, every step becomes valuable. Every experience becomes purposeful. Every day becomes a stone laid upon the path of eternal ascent. This is the highest victory over failure. Not the avoidance of mistakes, but the complete triumph of light within one's inner life. It is the moment when the human spirit stands upright, clear, fearless, and ready for higher realms. It is the success that endures forever. Part 8. Practical Steps for Overcoming Failure. Exercises for Strength, Clarity, and New Beginnings. Chapter 36. Daily Exercises for Inner Strength. Inner strength is not developed in dramatic moments but in the quiet, steady rhythm of daily alignment with the light. Every human being possesses a spiritual core that longs for strength, clarity, and upright action. Yet this strength only awakens when the person consciously uses the day as a field for spiritual exercise. Failure often persists because the inner being remains passive while the intellect dictates the rhythm of life. To break this pattern, the seeker must practice simple yet powerful exercises that reconnect him with his spiritual essence. 1. The morning alignment. Before rising, allow your intuitive perception to awaken by consciously offering your will to the light. A simple inward statement is enough. I align myself with purity, clarity, and right action today. This sets your radiations in motion in the correct direction. It strengthens your inner vibration against confusion and discouragement. 2. The exercise of clear willing. Choose one small action each day that you will complete with purity and focus. It may be honesty in a simple communication, diligence in a minor task, or kindness to someone who needs it. Each fulfilled intention strengthens the spiritual will and dissolves the fear of falling short. 3. The evening review. Before sleep, reflect briefly, without judgment, on 3 questions. Where did I act in clarity today? Where did I act in confusion? What do I offer up for purification so I may rise brighter tomorrow? This exercise breaks the cycle of unconscious living, helping the seeker build strength through recognition, sincerity, and gratitude. Chapter 37. Practices for letting go of past failures. Many people remain trapped in failure not because the event itself still has power, but because the memory of the event continues to drain their radiational strength. The Grail Message teaches that every thought, emotion, and will impulse forms living shapes in the ethereal environment. When a person revisits past failures with bitterness, shame, or regret, he strengthens the very shadows he is trying to escape. 1. The exercise of truthful naming. Write down the past failures that still burden you, briefly, factually, without emotional coloring. Seeing them clearly helps you move from emotional interpretation to spiritual recognition. 2. The exercise of release through light. Sit in stillness. Breathe calmly. Visualize the event or memory rising before you, not as a wound, but as an opportunity for growth. Then inwardly state, I take the lesson. The rest I release. This simple movement of will dissolves the dark forms you previously nourished. 3. The exercise of forward movement. Choose one new action that contradicts the old mistake. For example, if you once neglected responsibility, take responsibility today. If you once acted in fear, act courageously today. If you once hid in shame, stand upright today. By doing so, you transform the past through present purity. Letting go becomes possible when the seeker understands that failure is not a prison but a teacher, and once the lesson is taken, the door opens of its own accord. Chapter 38. Techniques for rebuilding radiational harmony. Failure brings disturbances in the radiational balance of the human being. These disturbances manifest as confusion, heaviness, discouragement, and fear. But the Grail Message reveals that radiations respond immediately to purity, clarity, gratitude, noble striving, and truthfulness. To rebuild radiational harmony, the seeker must practice techniques that bring his inner being back into natural alignment. 1. The cleansing breath. Breathe in deeply while inwardly calling for clarity. Exhale slowly while letting go of heaviness. Each breath becomes a movement of spiritual willingness. 2. The exercise of upright posture. The human posture affects radiational flow. Stand or sit upright, allowing the spirit to work more freely. This seemingly simple act lifts your inner vibration and clears the mind. 3. The atmosphere exercise. Close your eyes and imagine your inner atmosphere as a field of light. Notice any areas of darkness, worry, fear, regret, anger. Do not fight them. Simply direct a pure, sincere longing for light toward them. Darkness cannot withstand genuine longing. It dissolves. 4. The gratitude technique. List 5 things for which you are grateful each day. Gratitude opens radiational pathways and reconnects you with the uplifting currents of creation. These techniques bring harmony not through force but through purity of willing, allowing your radiations to shine naturally again. Chapter 39. Weekly reflection questions for growth and healing. A week offers enough experiences to reveal whether you are rising, stagnating, or falling in your inner life. Reflection is not a burden, it is a tool of liberation. The Grail Message emphasizes recognition, because only what you recognize can be transformed. At the end of each week, sit quietly and reflect on questions such as 1. Where did I act from my higher intuitive perception? This helps you recognize moments when the Spirit guided you. 2. Where did I act from fear, pride, laziness, or self-will? This reveals the seeds of future setbacks. 3. What patterns repeated themselves? Patterns are messages from the spiritual laws, urging correction. 4. Who or what influenced my inner atmosphere the most? This teaches you to guard your inner environment more consciously. 5. What new steps can I take next week toward uprightness and clarity? The spiritual path is a path of movement, not stagnation. These weekly reflections transform passive living into conscious development. With each recognition, the seeker becomes lighter, freer, and more empowered. Chapter 40. Creating a lifelong path of upright action and courage. A life free from the tyranny of failure is not created through occasional effort but through a lifelong rhythm of alignment with spiritual laws. Courage is not a human fabrication, it is a radiational quality that arises naturally when the inner being stands upright. Upright action flows from clarity of will, and clarity of will comes from living in harmony with the light. 1. The path of continuous renewal. Never carry the past into tomorrow. Each day provides a fresh field of sowing. Failures dissolve when the seeker remains in movement toward the good. 2. The discipline of purity. Keep your intentions clean. Even if your action is small, let its core be pure. The spiritual laws amplify purity far more than magnitude. 3. The courage of trust. Trust in the inviolable justice of the spiritual laws. Trust that every sincere effort bears fruit. Trust that the light is active even when you do not see immediate results. 4. The rhythm of useful action. Do the next right thing, simply, sincerely, consistently. Courage grows in the doing, not in thinking. 5. The radiance of perseverance. The human spirit is created to triumph. Every upward movement strengthens its radiance. Perseverance is not stubbornness, it is the quiet, steady loyalty to the light. A life built on upright action and courage becomes a beacon, not only for the individual but for all who cross his path. Such a person no longer fears failure, for he walks in harmony with the laws that lead to fulfillment and victory. Conclusion. The rise of a human being. WHO understands failure. Standing on the mountain of recognition. The human being who truly understands failure stands transformed. He no longer trembles before the shadows he once called defeat. Instead, he surveys his path with new eyes, eyes awakened by recognition, sharpened by truth, and strengthened through experience. Such a person becomes upright within, because he finally perceives the laws that weave through every event of earthly life. Failure has revealed itself not as an enemy, but as a guide, an uncompromising teacher that has pointed out the consequences of every inner seed he once sowed. In this recognition, the human being stands on a mountain, free from confusion. He sees that nothing was wasted. Every fall had meaning, every delay had purpose, every disappointment contained instruction. He now understands that life on earth is a field of learning in which the spirit matures only through right volition, purity of will, and courageous movement. Thus he becomes grateful for what he once despised, and humbled by what he once resisted. Such a person steps forward with renewed clarity, knowing that failure was only the darkness that arose whenever his inner radiations fell out of harmony with the will of creation. And with this clarity, he rises, not because the world suddenly becomes smoother, but because his inner footing has become firm. He no longer defines himself by outward results. His value does not shrink or expand with earthly outcomes. Instead, his worth is anchored in the light, in the truth, and in the steadfastness of his spirit. This human being now lives with a quiet confidence. He understands that as long as he sows rightly, he must reap rightly. As long as he stands in the law, he cannot be lost. As long as his inner being is aligned with truth, no fall can destroy him, and no delay can cripple his destiny. He rises because he now moves in harmony with the laws of creation. He rises because he has finally understood. Epilogue. A future where failure is no longer feared. Humanity in the coming purification of clarity and truth. Humanity stands at the threshold of a great purification, a time when all concealed errors, wrong attitudes, and distorted interpretations will be swept to the surface. The Grail Message speaks clearly of these times, a cleansing through the workings of the immutable laws, which are now intensifying around the earth. In such a time, the human illusions surrounding failure will crumble. False measures of success, wealth without integrity, applause without substance, positions without merit, will lose their power. Systems built on deception will collapse under the weight of their own emptiness. Individuals who cling to pride, ambition, and fear-driven striving will experience great shaking until they are forced to see differently. But those who walk in clarity will perceive this purification not as destruction but as liberation. It is the sweeping away of falsehoods that have trapped mankind for centuries. It is the unveiling of truth in its purity. It is the exposure of inner reality. In the world to come, failure will not be feared, because it will be understood as lawful consequence. Success will not be worshipped, because spiritual maturity will become the true measure. Individuals will seek alignment rather than ambition. Work will be an expression of calling, not competition. Destiny will unfold purely, without distortion through fear or ego. Humanity will enter a new radiational atmosphere, lighter, clearer, more luminous, where thoughts and decisions bear fruit more swiftly. In such a world, fear loses its grip, and misunderstanding dissolves under the brilliance of truth. This future begins within every individual who takes up the path of recognition now. For the new humanity will be built by those who allow their inner being to be purified first. Appendix: Meditations and Practices for Clarity, Resilience, and New Beginnings. These practices are designed to support daily strengthening, inner cleansing, and radiational renewal. They reflect the principles of the Grail Message while remaining practical for earthly life. 1. Morning Radiational Alignment Meditation. Purpose: to align the inner being with the light before engaging with the world. Sit upright, breathe calmly, and imagine the light above you, not as a fantasy, but as a living reality. Silently affirm, "May my will today be pure, upright, and aligned with the laws of creation." Sense your inner core, your spirit, growing steadier and clearer. This sets your radiations into harmony before the day begins. 2. Evening Reflection for Renewal and Release. Purpose: to prevent emotional residue from darkening the inner path. Reflect on 3 questions. Where did I act against my inner conviction today? Where did I allow fear or doubt to guide my decisions? Where did I uphold truth, courage, or purity? Recognition loosens burdens and strengthens spiritual direction. 3. The 3-seed practice for overcoming failure. Purpose: to consciously sow the right inner attitudes. Choose 3 seeds to plant daily. Clarity: seeing the situation without emotional distortion. Courage: taking one step forward, even if small. Commitment: maintaining direction despite obstacles. These seeds shape your radiations and alter future harvests. 4. Radiational Cleansing for Heavy Days. Purpose: to dissolve accumulated anxiety, shame, or self-doubt. Breathe deeply. Visualize burdens leaving your solar plexus like dark smoke. Visualize fresh, luminous radiations flowing from above and through you. Do not force, allow. 5. Weekly Alignment Questions. Purpose: to keep your path straight and your will pure. Every week, answer: am I living by truth or by appearance? Am I acting from fear or from conviction? What inner attitude needs adjustment for the coming week? This cultivates inner honesty, the foundation of spiritual growth. Final note: may this work illuminate, correct, and uplift. May it loosen the chains of fear, dissolve the illusions of failure, and reawaken the noble striving within every human spirit. May it guide all who read it toward clarity, courage, and a life lived in harmony with the will of the Creator. For wherever truth shines, failure loses its power. Wherever recognition dawns, the spirit rises. And wherever the light penetrates, fear dissolves forever.